Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to unpack dense source material, really get into it, and pull out the actionable insights. Today, we're looking at military history, some specific batters that, honestly, they seem to flip conventional wisdom on its head. You know, the idea that sheer size wins wars.
Yeah, we're diving into the early Islamic conquests, drawing a lot from sources like quality broke empires and some related notes. We're essentially trying to reverse engineer their success.
Because the numbers involved, they're just staggering. You really have to start there.
Absolutely.
Take the Battle of al-Qadisiyyah. This is 636 CE. You've got, what, maybe 30,000 fighters? Something like that?
Around that number, yeah. Facing a Sasanian imperial army estimated at, well, 120,000.
Okay, so that's a 1-to-4 disadvantage.
Yeah.
Right there, standard military thinking says the smaller force gets crushed, annihilated.
But they didn't. They won decisively, shattered the Sasanian power in the region.
And that wasn't even the most extreme example, was it?
Not even close. Look at Yarmouk. Around the same time, the early Muslim force, maybe 40,000,
Okay.
against a huge Byzantine army. Estimates go up to 240,000.
240,000. That's 1 against 6. Those odds are almost unbelievable. Suicidal, really.
Yet again, a decisive victory led to the Byzantines pulling out of the Levant entirely.
So the sources we're looking at, they argue this wasn't luck, not some, fluke.
Exactly. They argue it's proof of a different kind of strength. The empires, the Sasanians and Byzantines, they were counting heads, quantity, mass.
Right.
The early Muslims, though, they were counting on something else. Superior leadership, better doctrine, and this incredible faith or cohesion. That was their quality.
And that's our mission today, right? To unpack how that quality managed to break the back of sheer quantity.
Precisely. And it's not just history for history's sake. These lessons, these sort of engineering specs of victory, they're being looked at right now. People are framing them as blueprints for modern strategy, thinking about unified defense, especially looking ahead to, say, 2025 to 2030.
Okay, so before we dig into the battles themselves, let's set the scene. Who are they actually fighting?
Good point. We need to understand the context. This is right after the prophetic era. The new Muslim state immediately bumps up against the global superpowers.
The big players.
The two big ones. The Sasanian Empire in Persia, Mesopotamia. Very powerful. And the Byzantine Empire. The Eastern Romans, controlling Anatolia, the Levant. These were the empires of the day.
And these weren't pushovers. Established empires, centuries of military tradition, wealth, bureaucracy.
Oh, absolutely. Okay. Sophisticated states, advanced weaponry for the time, complex logistics, intelligence networks. They could mobilize huge resources.
Compared to the early Muslim forces who were, well, smaller, less equipped.
Definitely fewer men, often less gear, certainly didn't have the same kind of massive state-run supply chains. But, and this is the core point, they had those other factors, the superior leadership, this really innovative organization, and profound moral cohesion.
And you're saying those aren't just soft factors. They become real force multipliers on the battlefield.
Quantifiable advantages. When they align properly, they can overwhelm material deficits. It's fascinating stuff.
Okay, let's tackle that first factor then. Leadership as a weapon. The source material stresses this isn't just about giving orders from the back.
No, it's about leadership being an active force multiplier in the field.
Yeah.
Think about someone like Khalid ibn al-Walid. The sources highlight his ability to generate and maintain incredible rapid maneuver and tempo.
Tempo, meaning speed, moving faster than the enemy.
Speed in everything. Movement, decision-making, striking. Imagine the Byzantine command structure. Maybe it takes them days to process intel, formulate a plan, get orders down through layers of command to, 240,000 men.
Right, that takes time. Bureaucracy.
But if Khalid can assess, decide, and execute a maneuver in, say, half a day, he's operating way faster. It's like he's fighting on a different timescale. He creates gaps, opportunities, just by being quicker.
Multiplying his smaller force's effectiveness through time.
Exactly. And that speed, that tempo, it's combined with this ruthless focus on decisive strikes. It's not about trying to beat the whole 120,000 Sasanians everywhere at once.
Yeah.
No. It's about the leadership having the clarity to see the critical point, the hinge, the weak spot. Maybe it's a flank. Maybe it's a moment when the enemy is disorganized. Maybe it's hitting their command structure.
And then concentrating everything there.
Maximum pressure right at that decisive point. That's leadership translating vision into focused action.
Okay, so that leadership vision directly informs their military doctrine, what the sources call doctrine in motion. How did their actual way of fighting differ from the standard imperial playbook?
Well, the core principle was concentration of force. Imperial armies often relied on their sheer mass, deploying broadly. The Muslim forces, operating from that leadership clarity, were always looking for the enemy's critical vulnerability.
Where they'd overextended, maybe, or where their command was slow.
Exactly. Identifying that spot and then hitting it with everything they had, overwhelming it locally. It exploits the enemy's size and inherent slowness.
It sounds almost obvious in hindsight, but surely the Byzantines and Sasanians knew they were large and maybe a bit ponderous. They'd fought wars for ages. How did the Muslims structurally exploit that?
Through flexibility in their force structure. It was built for speed and coordination. Heavy reliance on very mobile cavalry for those rapid flanking moves, working hand in glove with disciplined, solid infantry.
So cavalry for the speed and shock, infantry for the staying power.
Precisely. And that coordination, that combined arms approach, seems to have been more fluid, more responsive than the often more segmented imperial armies, like the Byzantine legions, which might be tied to specific regions or commanders. It was an organizational advantage.
And the psychological impact of that speed and coordination must have been huge.
Absolutely. Leads directly to psychological dominance. When you're consistently being outmaneuvered, hit faster and harder than you expect, even if you have more soldiers, it erodes morale.
Especially if you thought it would be an easy fight.
Imagine being a Sasanian soldier in that huge army. You expect to roll over this smaller force, but instead they're always appearing where you don't expect, hitting hard, and your own vast numbers feel clumsy. It creates a powerful moral edge for the smaller, faster force.
So the takeaway is, a smaller, really well-organized force, driven by clear leadership and will, can completely change the game.
Fundamentally alter the operational outcome. Speed, clarity, and will can bring mass.
Right, let's make this concrete. Case study 1. Al-Qadisiyyah, 636 CE. This is the 30,000 versus 120,000 fight. How exactly did they pull this off? What was the operational plan?
Okay, al-Qadisiyyah, a masterpiece of planning. First off, terrain selection. Absolutely vital. They chose a battlefield near the edge of the desert.
Why the desert edge?
It neutralized the Sasanian advantages. Their heavy armored cavalry and large infantry formations weren't suited for deep desert pursuit. So the Muslims had a secure flank or retreat route, and it forced the Sasanians to fight in a somewhat constrained area, limiting how much of their massive force could engage at once.
Smart. Forcing the fight onto their terms. Did they use fortifications?
Sources suggest they used defensive works. Maybe some field entrenchments, perhaps leveraging marshy ground, anything to channel the Sasanian attacks, slow them down, create bottlenecks for those huge columns. Friction is key.
Okay, but the elephants, the Sasanian war elephants, I mean, those must have been terrifying, like ancient tanks.
They were a huge psychological and physical weapon designed to smash infantry lines and cause panic. Countering them was critical.
How do you counter elephants with, swords and spears?
This is where doctrinal innovation really comes in. The Sasanians relied on the shock and awe. The Muslim response wasn't just brute force, it was precise, targeted tactics.
Like what?
Focusing on vulnerabilities. Reports mention targeting the elephants' trunks, blinding them by attacking their eyes, and critically, going after the mahouts, the riders controlling them.
Take out the driver.
Exactly. An uncontrolled, panicked elephant is a liability. It can stampede backwards right into its own troops, causing chaos, turning the enemy's greatest asset against them.
Wow. That alone must have hit Sasanian morale hard. Seeing their ultimate weapon fail, even turn on them.
Immensely damaging psychologically. And this tactical success was amplified by another key element, the sequencing of reserves.
Meaning how they used their backup troops.
Yes, but not just plugging gaps. The reserves were used as timed reinforcements, almost like shock troops. In the final stages, as the Sasanian lines were tiring after days of fighting, fresh Muslim reserves, some apparently having force-marched from Syria, were thrown in.
Right at the critical moment.
Exactly. To regain momentum, exploit the exhaustion, and deliver the decisive blow. It shows brilliant timing and command control.
So, beyond the battlefield tactics, what about the command structures? You mentioned bureaucracy earlier. Was that a factor here?
Oh, a huge factor. The sources paint a stark contrast. On the Muslim side, you had unity of command, clear leadership, simple C2 command and control. Decisions could be made and implemented rapidly.
And the Sasanian?
Imperial bureaucracy. A complex, hierarchical structure. Lots of different nobles commanding their own contingents, potential rivalries, long communication lines back to commanders, or even the court. Their C2 was sluggish, inherently slow.
Can you give an example of how that might play out, like with the elephant counter?
Well, imagine the Sasanian commander seeing the elephant tactic failing. To adapt, they'd likely need to consult, get buy-in from subordinate commanders, relay complex new orders down through multiple layers. It's slow. They couldn't pivot quickly.
Whereas the Muslim side.
With their simple C2, the chain of command was shorter, clearer. Local commanders likely had more autonomy to react as long as they stuck to the overall plan, the unified aim. Trust and delegation were key.
So faster adaptation built into the system.
Much faster. And underpinning all of this was the morale and mission clarity. The Muslim fighters had this powerful sense of why they were fighting, a deep belief in their cause.
Which translates to battlefield resilience.
Absolutely. When things get tough, when units take losses, that shared belief helps them hold the line longer, endure more hardship than perhaps a purely professional army fighting for pay or forced conscripts. It's a massive psychological multiplier.
So the result at al-Qadisiyyah wasn't just a victory.
It was the shattering of a major imperial field army by a force a quarter of its size. It effectively ended Sasanian dominance in the region. Quality didn't just beat quantity, it annihilated it.
Okay, if al-Qadisiyyah tested the model, Yarmouk in 636 CE seems to push it to the absolute limit, 40,000 versus 240,000 Byzantines. That 1-to-6 ratio, it just boggles the mind. What was the method here? How did they overcome such overwhelming mass?
Yarmouk required even more sophistication, partly because the Byzantine army was arguably more professional, more cohesive than the Sasanians at that point. A key element sources point to is the use of distributed command under a unified aim.
Distributed command, meaning decentralized.
To a degree, yes. Not chaos, but empowering competent commanders in different sectors of the battlefield. As long as everyone understood the overall objective, the unified aim, local commanders could react instantly to threats or opportunities in their zone.
So if one part of the massive Byzantine line surges forward,
the local Muslim commander doesn't need to wait for orders from the overall leader, who might be miles away dealing with another crisis. They can deploy their local reserves, shift formations, counterattack immediately. It builds incredible resilience into the line.
almost like a precursor to modern network-centric ideas, where information and authority are pushed down.
You could definitely see parallels. It allowed the Muslim line to absorb the massive pressure from the Byzantines. They might bend under the weight, but because local commanders could react fast, the line didn't break.
Okay, that explains the resilience. But how do they actually win? How do you break an army 6 times your size, even if you can hold them?
You don't just charge straight ahead. The sources describe a process, often summarized as feint and fix, then flank.
Break that down for us.
Okay, feint. Use smaller, aggressive attacks, maybe cavalry probes, to draw the Byzantines' attention and force them to commit their reserves to certain areas. Make them react to you.
Get them looking the wrong way.
Exactly. Fix. Once they've committed troops to those areas, pinning them down, you fix them. Then comes the decisive part. Flank.
Using that mobile cavalry again.
Yes. Unleash the highly mobile, hard-hitting cavalry reserves against the vulnerable flanks of the now fixed Byzantine formations, often targeting the seams between different units or commands where coordination might be weakest.
So the goal isn't necessarily to kill everyone, but to break their organization, create chaos.
Precisely. It's a psychological kill as much as a physical one. The speed and violence of those flank attacks, hitting where they weren't expecting, would cause confusion, disrupt command, break cohesion. Once that happens, once the belief in their massive formation shatters, the army starts to dissolve. Method defeating mass.
And what about logistics? Feeding 240,000 troops must have been a nightmare for the Byzantines.
A huge undertaking. Long, vulnerable supply lines stretching back through Syria or Anatolia. Any disruption could be catastrophic. The imperial army was a giant, yes, but a hungry giant.
And the Muslim forces?
Shorter lines, likely operating closer to friendly territory or the desert edge again. Simpler logistical needs. And again, this is where moral cohesion becomes almost a logistical factor.
Yeah, so?
A force driven by strong shared belief can endure temporary shortages, push through hardship, maintain discipline even when supplies are low, in a way that a purely professional or conscript army might not. That shared purpose acts like a buffer against logistical shocks.
So the Byzantine complexity becomes a weakness, while the Muslim simplicity and cohesion become a strength.
In essence, yes. The result at Yarmouk was another empire-defining defeat. Byzantium lost control of the Levant. It proved, again, that sophisticated method, superior organization, and that cohesive spirit could overcome seemingly impossible odds. These weren't just battles, they were demonstrations of military science.
Right, so we've seen the how in detail with Qadisiyyah and Yarmouk. Now let's pull out the core principles. The sources distill this down into 5 decisive factors. These aren't just historical observations. They're presented as almost like universal engineering specs for victory.
That's a good way to put it. They represent the essential ingredients required to build a force capable of punching far above its weight.
Okay, factor 1, leadership excellence. We talked about this. It's more than just rank. It's clarity, courage under fire, competence.
And the ability to inspire trust, enabling that fast, decentralized action we saw.
Factor 2, doctrinal innovation. This is about adaptability, right? Not fighting the enemy's fight, but finding ways to exploit their weaknesses.
Like the elephant counter tactics. Understanding the specific threat and devising a tailored solution rather than just relying on standard procedures, it's about thinking creatively.
Factor 3, superior organization. This covers training, unit structure, but crucially simple command and control, C2. How simple are we talking?
Simple enough for speed and clarity to be paramount. Standardized training, clear roles, maybe simple signals flags, drums back then, but the key was trust. Empowering local commanders to act decisively within the leader's overall intent. Minimal bureaucracy, maximum speed.
Which ties directly into factor 4, tempo and logistics. Moving faster, supplying smarter. Always keeping the enemy reacting.
Exactly. The tempo comes from the leadership, the doctrine, and the simple organization. And the logistics need to support that speed, hence simpler, more resilient supply lines.
And finally, factor 5, moral cohesion. That sense of shared purpose, faith, belief, acting as a multiplier for everything else.
It's the glue that holds it all together,
Okay.
especially under extreme pressure. It provides resilience when tactics fail temporarily or when logistics get strained. It's the ultimate force multiplier because it fuels the will to fight and endure against those overwhelming odds.
Looking at those 5, you can see how they build on each other. They're not isolated points. They form a system.
A complete architecture for generating decisive force, regardless of initial numbers. And this is where we bridge that history, those 7th century battles, directly to today. Why is this framework, these 5 factors, suddenly so relevant again, especially thinking about the next, say, 5 to 10 years?
Well, the argument in the source material is pretty clear. It connects to the idea of potential versus actual power. There's often talk about the numerical size of the Muslim world, population, resources.
Right, the potential mass.
But the lesson from Qadisiyyah and Yarmouk is that mass alone isn't strategic weight. The argument is, if modern institutions can be built that actually embed these 5 factors, the leadership, the doctrine, organization, tempo, cohesion, then that numerical potential could be translated into real unified strategic weight.
It's about building the engine, not just having the fuel. The challenge isn't the potential. It's constructing the high-performance structures that turn potential into effective power. Quality needs to be institutionalized.
And the sources suggest this isn't just theory anymore, that there's actual movement.
Yeah, they point to specific developments as evidence of, quote, live momentum. The example given is the recent Pakistan-Saudi defense agreement.
Okay, why that specific agreement?
Because it's seen as reflecting a core principle from the source's associated book, The Nuclear Umbrella. Specifically, the idea of a collective defense clause.
Meaning?
The classic principle. Attack on one equals a response by many. This is framed as a modern application of the kind of strategic unity, that shared purpose and response that was so decisive back at Yarmouk and Qadisiyyah.
So it's taking factor 5, moral cohesion, and trying to institutionalize it at a geopolitical state-to-state level.
That's the interpretation presented. It's seen as a tangible step towards building that unified strategic architecture, moving from historical lesson to contemporary action.
Okay, let's unpack that proposed architecture more. The source book, The Nuclear Umbrella, lays out a bigger plan than just one agreement. How does it translate those 5 historical factors into a full, modern defense structure?
It's quite systematic. The book is structured to build the case logically. Part 1 is all about establishing the principle, proving from history, using Qadisiyyah and Yarmouk, that quality really can defeat quantity, setting the foundation.
Right, establishing the why. Then what?
Then parts 2 through 5 get into the how. They lay the actual institutional groundwork. This covers identifying core capabilities. The source highlights Pakistan's potential role there, and then gets specific about the architecture.
Like the treaty itself.
Exactly. Chapter 39 apparently details the proposed treaty, including that collective defense clause we mentioned. And Chapter 40 focuses on setting up the crucial command headquarters, HQ's structure.
Okay, so the HQ, that sounds like the modern equivalent of factor 3, superior organization, and factor 4, tempo, trying to build in that simple C2 and speed across different nations.
That seems to be the intent, designing an organizational hub to ensure clarity, coordination, and rapid response, replicating the agility they saw in the early conquests, but on a modern multinational scale.
And the book goes beyond just the HQ.
Oh yeah, it's comprehensive. Parts V through 8 detail the operationalization, how this structure would actually function day to day.
What kind of functions are we talking about? Just conventional military stuff.
Much broader, it outlines specialized regional commands, think distributed command again, for local responsiveness, but also crucial functional commands.
Functional commands, what does that mean?
These seem designed to embed Factor 2, doctrinal innovation. They focus on specific modern warfare domains, pushing aggressive capability building. It's not just about tanks and planes.
Like what specifically?
The source mentions things like developing rapid response capabilities for sacred sites defense, building advanced cyber operations using speed and precision to counter potentially larger, tech-heavy adversaries, and crafting a unified deterrence strategy.
So it's about finding modern ways to fight your fight, not theirs. Using asymmetric approaches, maybe tech, cyber speed, to offset conventional numerical disadvantages, like a 21st century version of the elephant tactics.
That's a very good analogy. It seems to be about identifying the modern equivalents of the elephants, the vulnerabilities in complex, bureaucratic, or technologically reliant opponents, and designing the force structure and doctrine to exploit those points decisively.
In the final parts of the book.
Parts 9X and X look ahead. They address the internal challenges of, overcoming resistance to such a big change. And they link this strategic architecture to a wider goal, which the source calls civilizational renewal.
So the argument is strategic strength provides the stability needed for broader progress.
That appears to be the connection made. The military architecture is presented as a necessary foundation for ensuring regional stability and fostering internal development and confidence.
Well, this has certainly been a deep dive. We started with those, frankly, mind-bending numbers from al-Qadisiyyah and Yarmouk, 30K versus 120K, 40K versus 240K. And the core argument we've unpacked is that these weren't miracles, they were demonstrations, blueprints, really.
Yeah, blueprints for how to succeed against seemingly impossible odds.
The central theme, pulled from the sources, is clear. When you align those key factors, leadership, doctrine, cohesion, and you institutionalize them through superior organization and maintain high tempo, your force becomes truly decisive. The sheer numbers of the opponent become less relevant.
That shocking math starts to make sense when you replace the simple variable of number of men with the much more complex but ultimately more powerful variable of engineered quality. And that quality has specific, identifiable components.
It's built, not just wished for.
Which leads us to a final thought, maybe something provocative for you, the listener, to chew on. The knowledge, the formula derived from history, those 5 factors, it's been distilled. It's understood, arguably now more clearly than ever.
So the challenge isn't intellectual.
Perhaps not primarily. The truly profound challenge, the real test for any modern group or nation or alliance, is not just understanding the lessons of Qadisiyyah and Yarmouk. It's the incredibly difficult practical task of execution, actually building that complex, efficient, high-tempo, morally cohesive architecture in the modern world.
Translating the blueprint into reality.
Exactly. Converting that latent potential, that numerical mass, into decisive strategic power. History shows unequivocally that it can be done. The lingering question is, who possesses the leadership, the will, and the discipline to build it again now?